Pathia Games gave us a chance to try out Let's School, a management sim that gives you control over a Japanese-styled high school. After you've constructed the school of your dreams with its easy-to-use building tools, you can help the students prepare for exams and train teachers to be better at their jobs, all while you do your best to keep the place running smoothly. Its simulation covers everything from waking sleepy kids in class to constructing an entire new wing of the building, and control like that can sometimes go to your head. The breadth of options can be overwhelming, but in a good way. There's a significant amount of minutia you can get into to perfect your little simulation, but Let's School is pretty patient with you and will hit you with notifications detailing what's going wrong at any given moment. The challenge is being able to address those concerns with a limited budget and a time crunch to consider as the semester ticks down to the all-important school-wide exams that determine the school's standing in the community and amongst other institutions. If you want a steady stream of new students, then the current flock had better be making something of themselves within your walls. But that lofty goal is not easily achieved. My early attempts to reform the dilapidated school building left in my care by the previous headmaster, who appeared to be some sort of strange cat person, were good examples of how bad things can go. Let's School's campaign mode gives you a set budget and several milestones to hit in order to keep your school afloat. Tiny goals like building restrooms and break rooms just make sense for any building that's going to house people for several hours a day. But there are some big pie-in-the-sky ambitions, like wanting your students to be found in all manner of industries after graduation, or just wanting your campus to be as amazing as possible. It will take a little time to understand. For example, I failed to figure out how to feed my school kids for pretty much an entire school year. The mess hall option is the first food service facility you gain access to, but I did not realize that it could only be constructed outside, which to be clear was my mistake, not the game's. So, day after day, starved children would roam the halls and sit through classes clutching their tummies, while dour music played in the background to reflect the pitiful circumstances. It was like something out of an old Depression-era newscast, and I found it pretty hilarious. But in context, it's a pretty horrid situation to be in, essentially starving children out of gross negligence. The lesson was learned. Food services will be a top priority on my next go-around. I then moved on to a new school, a fresh start with the knowledge I had gained in my first attempt. I also started this session in the sandbox mode in order to really dive into how elaborate I could get with my school building. With an unlimited budget and fully unlocked facilities, I carved out an obscene amount of real estate and built out a series of classrooms boasting high-end whiteboards and 30 or so lavish desks. The bathrooms were high-end with amenities like sliding doors and automatic hand dryers, and before a single student stepped foot through the doors, I constructed a massive cafeteria, thinking nothing like the previous hunger debacle would ever occur again. Not on my watch. I was a fool. As the school finally opened and the days went by, the cafeteria remained empty. There was no one running the kitchen or serving the kids. When you create a facility, you're sometimes required to staff it with a teacher. This was something I knew. However, not one among numerous teachers on staff was qualified to handle it, and that was something I wasn't prepared for. It was happening again. The dour music was rolling in. The kids were pacing about slowly, gripping their stomachs as thought bubbles of knives and forks floated above their heads. I'd built one of the finest school cafeterias in the nation, as far as I knew, yet students were fainting in the hallways from hunger. In my haste to rectify my past mistakes, I overlooked the fact that a teacher needs to run the smaller mess hall first. The experience they get from that job earns them the service certificate required to run a big fancy cafeteria, like the one collecting dust in my big fancy school. This realization took a while for me to come to, and after I'd finally built a mess hall, I needed to turn my attention to other areas of the school I'd heavily neglected while stressed over the food situation. There wasn't enough playground equipment. I'd hired a bunch of teachers who had a bunch of nothing to do, and worst of all, my students were mostly failing their classes. Luckily, you can get really hands-on with the curriculum aspect of Let's School simulation. You can not only assign teachers to classes, but can then schedule what courses they teach through the 5-day week. A handy graphic shows you a projection of how many kids are likely to be ready for testing by exam time, affected by a number of things like the child's individual traits or the skill level of the teacher. And you can go so far as to swapping kids between classes or putting teachers through trainings to bump those projections up. I was getting the hang of curriculum micromanaging when alarm bells started ringing out. The mess hall was on fire. Kids were running out of the building screaming things like, "We're doomed! What do I do?" And it's not just a game? That last one kind of freaked me out, if I'm being honest. Hold on a second. What do you mean by that? Are you trying to tell us something? Is there something that I should know? Oh, right, the school is on fire. A helpful notification let me know that I needed to put fire prevention equipment around the school so staff could use it to respond to emergencies like the one we've just found ourselves in. I did just that and watched as about 13 teachers rushed over to put out the fire, as they clearly weren't doing much of anything else before then. As our only food supply lay in a heap of smoldering rubble, I took it as a sign that maybe these children just weren't meant to eat. The emergency disrupted classes, so the kids who were already far behind were projecting to do even worse. I only wanted the best for these young minds, but fate and incompetence had other things in mind. I'd have been sad if it wasn't so funny. Perhaps my next school will be better. I'm thinking maybe parkour classes. Let's School is available on PC now.